One of the documentaries featuring in this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival is a film called Freedom Street. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of Freedom Street, Alfred Pek. Alfred, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I've read about you as well. You've done a lot of analysis, so I'm really happy that I've got this opportunity because I never thought this would have happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. All right. Well, before I ask you the first question, let's talk about your background, because as you were saying before we started recording, it is significant to the film.
Yes, that's right. So my background, as in like where I'm from, or the things that I do?
No, I mean the photo behind
the backdrop. The
yes.
photo, right? Yeah, the backdrop. Sure. So this is still from the film, the precise still from the film. This became the inspiration for the film's title. This is because this very particular street contains, refugee hostels in one city in Indonesia called Makassar. And there's about a dozen of these refugee hostels that were essentially like kind of an open detention center system. And this is in the city of Makassar, which the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had just visited recently as well. And there's a lot of connections there.
Thanks for that. That's very interesting to hear. So, yes. Alfred, let's talk about how Freedom Street, the film, how it all came about. What made you decide to make the film?
So I've been a refugee advocate since 2015 during my third year of university. When I started becoming involved in the cause, I was just thinking about creating a video portfolio for myself, because at that time I was doing a media degree and I wanted to look at something that's socially causeworthy. It was as simple as that. I didn't expect that my heart would be very much open to the issue. And then after a couple of years, I discovered that there's actually the Indonesia side of the equation to Australia's border protection policy that's basically harming the thousands of people in the region. And that's pretty much how I came to know the topic. But I wasn't prepared at the time to just jump into it yet. I was still sort of learning about the situation. I was learning about the facts and the figures and the stories that are here. People who have met as well who are in the offshore processing system, like in Papua New Guinea and Nauru. I've heard a lot of those stories. But around 2017, 2018, a lot of the refugees in Indonesia have begun to be released from these jail detention centers, and they're now starting to live in the community. And that's when I started really hearing the full extent of the refugees who never made it to Australia in the first place. And that's when I found out that Australia actually pays organizations in Indonesia to keep the refugees there at bay, to keep them detained, and to basically warehouse these people and incentivize Indonesia not to do anything with them. So there's a lot of it sounds like a conspiracy, but there's a lot of things that are basically unraveled as I go. And this is very particularly interesting for me. And interesting is an understatement. This is a very particularly overwhelming for me, because it's not just the one home country that's committing this human rights atrocity. It has colluded with my original home country, Indonesia, in actually doing this. I never thought I would ever be in this position, and I never thought that I would see Australia's refugee border protection policy impact in my original home country, Indonesia. It was so surreal to really have the awareness. And when I finally get the opportunity to visit and record this film, I was at a loss for words, because this is just something I never ever thought would have happened at all. And I guess from knowing these facts and building a relationship with these people who are stuck in my original home country because of my current home country, it gives me the drive to basically, all right, this is the time. I have to say something, and I have to make this film no matter what. And I keep going with this. A lot of hard work, a lot of self-drive. There's not a lot of support at all when it comes to this film. It's just not a very popular topic. It's only just now that even a lot of amongst the refugee advocacy that they're talking about the Indonesia side of things. It's literally only just now. So I was way ahead of the trend in the sense.
What a fascinating explanation and background to making the film. So, Alfred, tell me about the three people in particular that you focus on. How did you find them, and how open and willing were they to tell their complete stories for you?
So the three stars, I would describe them as some of the most invisible stories on the planet. Not even Australian refugees advocates would, or people who are, basically look at the media or the filmmaking side of things would be aware of them at all. So I've got Junaid, he's a Rohingya man, Ashfaq, who's from Pakistan, and Aziza, who's a stateless girl. Stateless. She doesn't come from anywhere. She doesn't even know where she's from or where she belongs to because of the complex circumstance that she was born into. And this is how I got in touch with them. I basically did a call out. I had to be very careful about who I associate with because a lot of these people would be quite desperate, not just for money, but also just for just the support, really. It makes me really sad when I start thinking about that. And one of the promises that I gave them is empowerment and opportunity for them to have their voice out there and really give them all the connections so that in hopes they can find ways of resettlement and having their work or their, the things that they wanted to do and adding that agency, because for the longest time, the people that I filmed, they have nothing. They literally were constantly ignored and they never get the right connections and the right people. And there's a lot of people that have been out there interviewing these people's stories. In return, they've got nothing. Sure, they might get the satisfaction of telling their stories out there, or maybe some cash incentive or things like that, but there's no real change. And one of the promises I did is that I'll do whatever it takes to get these people, the right connections, so that in hopes they can be resettled, or at least have them empowered to get the voice out there, because they truly deserve that.
Again, how interesting, and they are so forthcoming and willing to talk, etc. And you filmed them over a number of.
They're the bravest one.
Yeah.
Yes, they were the bravest one, because a lot of people are genuinely scared if they speak up, they could jeopardize their resettlement opportunity.
Yes.
Because these people are essentially in limbo, but these people, because they're the most invisible, they've almost got nothing to lose.
Yep.
In a weird way. So, but it's not always. It certainly wasn't very rosy or sunshiny. It was very difficult, and it just happens I've got the three. And I'm so glad that I insisted on having a female perspective, because there's zero female perspective in a lot of stories that are for refugees in transit. There are a lot of female refugee stories that have made it to Australia, right? But there's not a lot of those that are still stuck, especially those that are a female stateless girl who's not even 21 yet until this year.
That is so powerful, and it's great that you did that. So tell me about your process, because getting funding or being able to produce this film, make this film over a number of years, and of course you also use some news footage, some other footage as well. That must have been quite difficult for you, I suppose, because it's never easy to fund a documentary.
It was very difficult. 95% of this film was self-funded.
Okay.
There is no support from any government. There's no support from even any commercial interest. The 5% that I do receive the support are from the generous donations of the people in the community. And those are the only ones that are aware of it. And because I made personal connections, there is zero support for this kind of film in Australia, full stop. And I'm shocked, because I would have thought people in the arts would be more interested in something like this. But because of the precisely very controversial, well, I won't say controversial, but precisely because of the very heavy nature that this film carries through, it's quite overwhelming for a lot of these people. And a lot of their news archive footage, I basically operate under the fair dealings law, where you do have the rights to commentate these footage and things like that, but it probably will never be broadcasted unless there's a very rich benefactor, because a lot of these broadcasters would probably want to pay for these archive footage, but I can't afford that. Yet it's so crucial to the conversation that needs to be told.
It certainly is. That's really interesting to hear that. And I know with the previous government that they were not particularly sympathetic.
Not even the current government. Frankly, to be honest, not even the current government. And that's precisely because of the influence of the previous government as well. So it's a bipartisan issue that's been agreed upon. And there's a lot of these conversations that needs to be told, because this is one of those things where Labour and Liberal Party actually agreed upon, and that's actually quite disturbing, considering the billions of dollars that this country has spent on creating these offshore processing system, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that Australia has basically support for the organization to keep these refugees warehoused in Indonesia at bay.
True. However, it looks like there is going to be more of an agreement and friendly sort of approach between Australia and Indonesia. So maybe things could change.
We would like that to be the case, and we have to hope. There's no other way. There is no other way. For the longest time, when you think about it, in this instance, we would have saved a lot of money if we basically fairly assess these people and not treat them to such abuse, and to create these myriads of, basically torture camps. We would have allowed more Australians to know these people. We would have allowed them to contribute to the economy, and we would have basically answered some of our worker shortage issue.
Okay.
There's a lot of benefits to that.
Yes. No, I understand. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about your filmmaking process. Was it you doing the filming with a camera, sound recording, etc., or did you have a small team with you? How did all of that filming work?
I started the filmmaking mostly just by me, quite literally. There is no one else, because when I first started this project, I was working as a freelancer, so I didn't have a lot of money. But being a content creator freelancer, having done video journalism before that, I had the equipment, I have the skills, and I was just able to start that off. As I gone through the filmmaking, and I started changing jobs, I was able to then pay a few people to do a bit of the filming, to grab some of the footage, but that didn't come later, unfortunately. And also I was able to then upgrade some of my equipment, because I was truly filming those things on some of the most rudimentary devices there for me, because I just have my DSLR, I have my basic Zoom, and at some point I had to rely on exclusively a mobile lapel mic, because my Zoom broke down at that time and I couldn't afford to get another one. So there was a lot of that struggle. And also internet sharing files. I wasn't able to go back to Indonesia in 2020 or 2021 because of COVID, of course. And I was still in the process of finishing the film's edits. So I was, that's the beauty of today's world. We are able to transfer files across the internet. And that's how we piece all the stories together. And it organically created a story arc where I can basically follow them up, across the years. And that's something that I never thought I would be able to do or plan to. So that's one of the biggest surprises that I've got in the filmmaking process.
Exactly. And we see their situation reasonably up to date. Have you been keeping in touch with the three of them to see where they're at right now?
Yes. So I have become their actual friends. I am their supporters all the way. The first thing that we have to all realize is that when it comes to working with refugees, it's not just the one time. That's not ethically right. They're not looking for money. They're looking for agency, and they're looking for support. it's not about my view or anything. It's just about what's actually practical, pragmatic, and morally ethical. We have to give them empowerment. And once you start working with them, you are really supporting them, supporting them through their journey. And that's what I've been doing pretty much this whole time, even to this day.
Very interesting to hear that. Very good. So you've already mentioned a little bit about the editing, but that must have been quite an intense process, because to get that story arc, as you've mentioned, and to get the story to flow, to integrate various other footage,
experts.
and so on.
Various experts and academics. If it wasn't for the work of my editor, obviously I structured the film, right? But if it wasn't for the work of my editor, I don't think I would be able to edit that. Not for the lack of my skill, but because I just wasn't simply emotionally able to. It's too overwhelming. It's too confronting in a lot of ways for me as well, because what is being screened right now is the tip of the iceberg of the entire situation, of what is basically essentially inside my head, right? And there's just a lot. There's just a lot of things that were very, very heavy. There are a lot of things that were very, very life-changing for myself personally, because I don't know how bad things could be in this world until I've basically gone through the process of making this film. And it just makes me furious, that Australia conveniently sweeps this problem away. This is something that is, and I'm speaking about the situation not as a filmmaker or a human rights activist. I'm just speaking about this film as a normal human being looking at the situation. This is something that is just unacceptable in many ways, and it's very expensive. It's very inhumane. You're reducing these people to nothingness. They're not even recognized in this globalized system, because 2 of the subjects are stateless to begin with. So how could they even be considered in the first place as a human being? Because they don't even ever get recognized. One of them doesn't belong from any particular culture. She was just born out of a wedlock, essentially, Aziza, and and Junaid was stripped of his people were stripped of their citizenship since 1982 from the Myanmar government. So there's just a lot of this injustice, and I have to thank the work of my editor for this.
Have they seen the film and responded to it?
Yes, and a lot of the crew were from that more sort of typical storytelling narrative background, so I had to do a lot of adjusting with them. I have come from, I do also love narrative filmmaking story. That is something that I also want to pursue in the future. But I've also been exposed to a lot of video journalism, and I'm trying to basically do something that covers both and delicately balance both sides, both the narrative storytelling and the facts and figures and the more sort of hard journalistic facts. Ultimately, I have to balance that, and I think I have been able to do so. I've been receiving a lot of very, very positive responses from a lot of refugee advocates and the people who are watching that, who have watched this. And I personally believe that we can't have just the personal stories to create a movement. I think we need to know the facts and the figures as well. And we can't have the facts and the figures without humanizing it. And so that's what I've done. I've done both in one.
Okay, very, very good to hear that. I must ask you, it's great that the film has been accepted by the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, and of course, having your film seen by a wider audience is very important. Are you hoping to have it screened elsewhere as well?
Yes, I have reached a lot of community organizations throughout the country and overseas, surprisingly, who are interested. So they want to do a lot of their own independent screenings. And that's pretty much the only way I've been doing it, besides submitting into festivals and such. I do want to eventually find a distributor where I don't have to be in charge of every screening, where I can just let it go. So that is something that I'm working towards, and I'm hoping that I can secure one before October.
Well,
before October. Yeah.
Hopefully it'll work out.
Yeah, because I think ultimately one of my goals is to create a tool for change that a lot of concerned citizens, activists, institutions, and people who are interested to be able to access my film independently, and they can essentially educate others on top of that. And that's how I see this film. Of course, as a filmmaker, I'm not just doing this because I'm not just a refugee advocate. I do want to pursue other stories, but having been exposed to this situation and also having gone through the journey myself, I think not as a refugee, but like going through the situation on the ground and having the capacity to talk about it, I think has put me in a very special position, and that's why I felt the moral obligation to do something like this, especially because I am an Australian citizen, and that there's a lot of privilege that comes with that. And I'm also Indonesian, which is something that not a lot of Australians can say, and a lot of refugee advocates can say in terms of, when it comes to talking about this very important topic.
Fair enough. That's very interesting to hear that. And just to conclude, Alfred, I'm quite intrigued. Were there any particular films or filmmakers that may have inspired your approach to your film?
Yes, Joshua Oppenheimer and Errol Morris's sort of work style and their approach in terms of basically doing documentaries. I'm very inspired by that because of how much they confronted the subjects and the topics, but also, especially with Joshua Oppenheimer, how beautifully the visuals were presented. It's very what's the best word to describe it? It's very it flows really well. The synchronization and the flows of the story, plus the mix of the visuals, it just flows really nicely. And that's something that I've also designed, or I aim to design in my film with the best of our ability and with the best of my ability in terms of the filming itself. And I think when I saw that, I can see how it gets the message across much better. I can see how everything just gets registered to people's head, or at least to my head, so much more, and how much it gets burned into the film more, into the head more. And that's something that I think really has driven me, and I think I want to keep going with that as a filmmaker. Not just in the documentary filmmaking sense, but also my future narrative-based projects.
Okay, good luck with all of those. Congratulations. We've been speaking to Alfred Pek, the director of Freedom Street, which is screening as part of this year's Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. Alfred, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me as well. And I really am full of gratitude with this opportunity.
Pleasure. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.